The Great Hall of Ironvale Keep had never held so many witnesses. 500 wolves from every corner of Valdres packed the ancient stone chamber, their bodies pressed against walls that had stood for 3 centuries. Nobility in velvet and silk crowded the front galleries. Commoners in rough spun wool filled the back. All of them had come for the same reason: to watch history unfold. An Alpha King claiming his fated mate happened once in a generation. An Alpha King claiming an Omega from a minor border pack was unprecedented. The kind of story that would be told around fires for decades to come. Seren Voss stood at the end of a crimson carpet that stretched like a river of blood toward the obsidian throne. Her hands trembled despite her best efforts to still them. The silver gown they had dressed her in caught the torchlight, making her skin look pale as moonlight. Too pale. She could feel every eye in the hall tracking her smallest movement, judging, calculating, waiting for her to fail. The whispers had started the moment she arrived at court 3 days ago. They followed her through every corridor, echoed in every chamber she entered. Border trash, minor pack Omega, no lineage worth mentioning. What does she bring except a pretty face? The Alpha King could have had a princess, could have had an alliance with the Southern Territories or the coastal packs. Instead, the mate bond had locked into place with a girl whose pack barely controlled 300 acres of forest along the Idaho border. Seren lifted her chin. She had learned long ago that showing weakness only invited more cruelty. Her brother Bram had begged her not to answer the royal summons. He had seen what happened to Omegas who reached too high. They fell. They always fell. But refusing a summons sealed with the king's mark was not an option. The mate bond had been confirmed by the kingdom's seers 2 weeks after that first meeting. She belonged to him now, whether she wanted to or not. And the worst part, the part that made her chest ache was something she refused to name, was that she had wanted to. Still wanted to, even knowing what was about to happen. She had seen him only once before. 3 months ago when Alpha King Cale Vantris had visited Thornwood Pack to settle a border dispute with rogue wolves who had been raiding their territory. She had been serving at the welcome feast invisible in her Omega role, carrying platters of roasted meat and keeping wine goblets filled. Then their eyes met across the crowded hall. The mate bond snapped into place like a physical thing. A golden thread of fire that connected her soul to his, binding them together in a way that transcended pack law or royal decree. She gasped, nearly dropping the tray in her hands. Her wolf, usually so quiet inside her, stirred with sudden, desperate recognition. Mate. The word echoed through every cell in her body, and she had seen him feel it too. Had watched those ice-blue eyes widen for just a fraction of a second. His nostrils flared. That scent hit him like a blow. A scent that should not exist together but did in her uniquely. For one breathless moment, the entire hall had faded away. There was only him. Only the impossible pull of recognition. Then he turned his face away as if she were nothing, as if the bond that screamed between them did not exist. He left Thornwood the next morning before dawn, and Seren told herself it was better that way. Safer. She should have known better. The royal summons arrived 1 week later. Heavy parchment, sealed with black wax and the Vantris crest. A command, not an invitation. Report to Ironvale Keep within 3 days to formalize the mate bond before the assembled court. Now she stood in that court watching as the crowd parted like a sea. Alpha King Cale Vantris descended from his throne. He was enormous. 6.5 feet of solid muscle and raw dominance that made the air itself feel heavier as he approached. His shoulders were broad enough to block out the torchlight behind him. His jaw could have been carved from granite. Pale hair fell past his collar, almost white in the firelight in those eyes. Those winter sky eyes that held the cold of killing frost. Beautiful, the court whispered. Beautiful and terrible and utterly without mercy. They called him the Winter King. Not because of his coloring, though that was part of it, but because of the chill that seemed to radiate from his skin. The cold that had been growing in him for 10 years ever since his father died and the curse took root. Seren could see it even from 20 feet away. The unnatural pallor of his skin, the slight stiffness in his movements as if his joints had started to freeze from the inside out. His breath misted in the warm air of the great hall, visible when no one else's was. He stopped 3 feet from her, close enough that she could feel that wrongness. That cold that should not exist in a living wolf. Alphas ran hot, everyone knew that. Their body temperature spiked higher than humans, higher even than betas and omegas. They were furnaces of life and dominance and raw power. But Cale Vantris felt like winter given form. Seren Voss, his voice carried through the hall without effort. Deep and commanding, layered with the kind of authority that made wolves twice his age lower their eyes in automatic submission. Omega of Thornwood Pack. Yes, your majesty. She kept her voice steady, kept her spine straight even as her wolf whimpered inside her, confused by the conflicting urges to submit and to press closer to her mate. The bond between us has been confirmed by the seers of Valdres. His face could have been carved from stone. No emotion showed there, no recognition of what stretched between them like a living thing. However, after careful consideration, I have determined that this bond does not serve the interests of my kingdom. The whispers around the hall grew louder. Confusion rippled through the crowd. This was not how these ceremonies went. The confirmation had already happened. The seers had declared them true mates. That made the bond sacred, unbreakable. A gift from the moon goddess herself. A king requires a queen of noble blood. Kale's jaw tightened, the only break in his mask. Of proven lineage, of political value. He paused, and something that might have been regret flickered in those winter eyes. You are none of these things. Gasps became murmurs. Murmurs became speculation. Somewhere in the back galleries, a woman laughed. The sound cut through Seren like a blade. Therefore, Kale's voice grew harder, colder. Before the witnesses gathered here, I formally reject the mate bond between us. You are released from any claim to my name, my throne, or my pack. The words hit her like physical blows. Rejection was not supposed to be possible with a true mate. The bond was too strong. It would fight back. It would pull them together no matter what logic or politics demanded. But she could feel it happening, could feel the connection between them starting to fray, starting to tear, and it hurt. Pain exploded through her chitas. Her wolf screamed inside her, a sound of pure anguish that no one else could hear. The bond severance felt like being ripped in half, like having her heart carved out while she was still breathing. Her knees buckled. She felt herself falling, felt the world tilt sideways as agony beyond anything she had ever experienced flooded every nerve. Her vision went white. Distantly, she was aware of something warm and wet on her upper lip. Blood. Her nose was bleeding from the trauma of having a mate bond violently severed. She should have hit the marble floor. Should have collapsed in front of 500 witnesses and confirmed every terrible thing they believed about lowborn Omegas who reached above their station. Instead, strong arms caught her. The cold shocked through her system, ice against fevered skin. She gasped, trying to pull away from the freezing touch, but the arms only tightened, drew her closer. Serene's vision cleared enough to see. Kale Vantris knelt on the marble floor. The Alpha King of Valdres, the most powerful wolf in the kingdom, knelt in the middle of his own throne room, with her cradled against his chest. His face was still carved from stone, but his eyes had gone from ice blue to molten gold, his wolf staring out through a human face. Around them, the great hall erupted in chaos. Power exploded from Kale. It crashed through the chamber like a tidal wave. Wolves dropped to their knees. Grown alphas from noble houses pressed their foreheads to the floor in automatic submission. Even the ancient walls seemed to shudder under the weight of his rage. But he was not looking at them. He was looking at her. His nostrils flared as he drew in a deep breath. Her presence flooded his senses, overwhelmed rational thought, drove into his brain like a spike. His arms tightened further, pulling her fully into his lap despite the 500 witnesses. Despite the rejection he had just publicly declared. You will not die. His voice was barely human, layered with the growl of his wolf, rough and desperate and furious all at once. Not here, not in my arms, not before I understand. Understand what the words came out weak, shaky. She could still taste blood in her mouth. His jaw clenched. A muscle jumped beneath the skin. Why you smell like salvation. The connection between them, the one that had been fraying and tearing, suddenly blazed back to life. Brighter than before, stronger than before. The bond that should have been severing was instead reinforcing, rebuilding itself with every second he held her, with every breath of her scent that filled his lungs. Serene's eyes widened as understanding crashed through her. He had meant the rejection, had believed it was necessary, but his wolf disagreed. And in the hierarchy of instinct versus logic in the war between human intention and animal need, the wolf was winning. Her gifts stirred inside her. The ability she had inherited from her mother and hidden her entire life. The sight that let her perceive what others could not. The threads of fate. They appeared before her eyes like shimmering strands of light that connected every living soul. Most wolves could not see them. Most would never even know they existed. But Serene had been born with the weaving in her blood, the ability to perceive the invisible cords that bound the world together. The bond between her and Kale blazed bright, pulsing with life and need and recognition. But wrapped around his heart like chains, she saw something else. Shadow. Dark tendrils of cursed magic so vile they made her stomach turn. They coiled around the bond around his chest, burrowing into his heart like parasites. And they were spreading, slowly, methodically, killing him from the inside out with cold that no fire could warm. Her breath caught. This was why he felt like ice, why his skin was pale and his breath misted in warm air. The curse was freezing him to death, had been for years, judging by how deeply the shadows had burrowed. And beyond the curse, beyond the immediate threads, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Her own death. If she fought this rejection, if she refused to accept it and forced the bond to complete, she saw herself dying within a month, saw the shadow chains spreading to her through their connection, saw her body frozen and lifeless while Kale howled over her corpse. The vision was so clear it stole her breath, but she also saw another path, thin as spider silk but present, a future where she accepted, where she walked away, where she lived. The choice crystallized in her mind with perfect clarity. She could fight and die, or she could surrender and survive. Seren pulled back from Kale's grip. His arms resisted for a moment, tightening as his wolf snarled in protest. But she was an Omega, weaker than him. If he wanted to hold her, she could not break free. He let her go. She did not understand why, did not understand the war she could see raging behind those gold-shot eyes. But she used the opportunity, pushed herself to her feet on shaking legs, wiped the blood from her upper lip with the back of her hand. The great hall had gone silent, 500 wolves holding their breath, waiting to see what the low-born Omega would do, expecting tears, begging, the pitiful collapse they had all anticipated. Seren lifted her chin and looked directly at the Alpha King. "I accept your rejection, Your Majesty." The words fell into the silence like stones into still water. Shock broke through Kale's expression for the first time, raw and unguarded and utterly human. The gold bled out of his eyes, leaving them blue again, confused, almost wounded. "You." He stopped, started again. "You accept." It was not a question. It was disbelief given voice. "Yes," Seren's voice grew stronger, clearer. "I release any claim to you, your name, your throne, and your pack. The bond between us is severed by mutual agreement." She had no idea if that was the right phrasing, had never heard of a rejection ceremony that ended this way. But the words felt true as she spoke them, felt like cutting a thread she could not afford to hold. Then she did something that would be talked about for years to come. She turned her back on the Alpha King of Valdris and walked toward the great doors. Every step was agony. The bond screamed in protest. Her wolf paced restlessly beneath her skin, desperate to turn back, to run to their mate and beg him to reconsider. But Seren had seen the future, had seen what staying would cost. She would not die for a man who did not want her. She made it 5 steps before the wave hit. The floor cracked, windows shattered. Wolves collapsed under the weight of his rage. The sound was deafening. The force was overwhelming. Wolves who had already submitted pressed themselves flatter against the floor. Some whimpered. Some stopped breathing entirely. The sheer magnitude of power flooding the chamber was beyond anything most of them had experienced. This was not the controlled dominance of an alpha maintaining the order. This was a wolf on the edge of breaking. Seren stumbled. The wave caught her mid-step and drove her to one knee. Her wolf submitted automatically, unable to resist the command layered into that crushing force. But she did not stay down. She should not have been able to rise. Every instinct, every biological imperative should have kept her pinned to the floor until the alpha's rage subsided. But Seren forced herself back to her feet, forced her legs to keep moving even as her wolf whimpered in confused terror. "You will not leave this hall." Kale's voice was barely recognizable. The growl of his wolf had completely overtaken human speech. The command slammed into her with physical force. Not a request, not a suggestion. An alpha order backed by power that could have leveled the building. She felt it trying to take root in her mind, felt the compulsion wrapping around her will like chains. And somehow, possibly, she resisted. She did not understand how, did not understand why the bond that had just been severed would leave her immune to his commands. But the orders slid off her like water off stone, present but powerless. 10 more steps to the doors. 5. Her hand touched the iron handle. Behind her, Kale's roar shook the very foundations of Ironvale Keep. The sound was not human, not wolf. Something between and beyond both. A king and a beast and a mate, all screaming in fury and denial and desperation. But Saren Voss pushed through the doors and disappeared into the corridor beyond. She did not look back. She could not afford to. Because if she looked back, if she saw whatever expression was on his face, she knew her resolve would shatter. She would turn around. She would run to him, and she would die in his arms just as the threads had shown her. So she ran. The corridors of Ironvale Keep blurred around her. Her silver gown tangled around her legs. Her breath came in gasps that hurt her chest. Behind her, she could hear chaos erupting in the great hall. Shouts, the crash of furniture, the sound of stone cracking further. She did not stop. The stables were her goal. If she could reach them, if she could get to her mare Mist, she might make it to the forest before anyone thought to pursue her. The border was 3 days' ride. She could disappear into Thornwood territory and never return, never see him again. The thought made her chest ache worse than the bond severance had. She pushed it away. Survival first, grief later. The stable doors appeared ahead. She grabbed them, hauled them open, stumbled inside. The familiar smell of hay and horse and leather wrapped around her. Mist whickered nervously from her stall, sensing her rider's distress. Going somewhere, Seren spun, her heart slamming against her ribs. A man leaned against one of the support beams, arms crossed over his chest, watching her with sharp golden eyes. He was older than Kale, perhaps by a decade, with the same pale hair and aristocratic features. But where the king's face was carved from stone, this man's held a predator's smile. Lord Corvus, the name came out as barely a whisper. The king's uncle, the regent who would rule if Kale died without an heir. The man who had been waiting in the shadows for 10 years, while his nephew slowly froze to death. Corvus pushed off the beam and approached with leisurely confidence. Fascinating display in there, truly fascinating. His golden eyes tracked over her face, lingering on the dried blood beneath her nose. No one has ever accepted a rejection from a true mate. The bond should have compelled you to fight, to beg, to do anything except walk away. He stopped 3 feet from her, close enough that she could see the intelligence in those eyes, the calculation. Yet you simply turned your back and left. His head tilted slightly. Why is that, I wonder? What did you see that made you choose survival over love? Seren's blood turned to ice. How did you know I saw anything? Corvus's smile widened. Because I have been watching you, little Omega, since the moment you arrived at court. And I have very good instincts about wolves who can perceive more than they should. His voice dropped lower. Tell me, what is your gift? What can you see that others cannot? She said nothing. Every survival instinct she possessed screamed at her to run. But Corvus stood between her and the stable doors. And she was an Omega facing a full-grown Alpha in his prime. She would not make it 2 steps. No answer, Corvus shrugged. No matter. You have already done me a great service tonight, whether you intended to or not. He began to circle her slowly like a wolf stalking prey. My nephew has been dying for 10 years. A curse placed upon him by his father with his dying breath. A punishment for refusing to execute his own mother based on accusations of infidelity. Serene's hands clenched into fists. She knew this story. Everyone in Valdris knew this story. The old king's jealous rage. The curse that was slowly killing his son and heir. What no one knows, Corvus continued, is that the mate bond was Kale's last hope. His wolf has been unstable for years, tearing at him from the inside. You were supposed to anchor it, to give him something to fight for, something to live for. He stopped directly in front of her again. But you accepted his rejection. You severed the bond by mutual agreement. His eyes glittered with triumph. Now his wolf has nothing to hold on to. Within a month, perhaps less, it will tear him apart completely. The throne will pass to me as regent. And you, little Omega, will have inadvertently helped me achieve what I have been working toward for a decade. Horror flooded through Seren. You planned this. You wanted him to reject me. Corvus laughed. Planned is such a strong word. Let us say I encouraged my nephew to see reason, to understand that taking a low-born Omega as his queen would weaken the kingdom. That duty must come before desire. He straightened his sleeves casually. I never imagined you would actually accept the rejection. That was a delightful surprise. Why are you telling me this? The question burst out before she could stop it. Because you intrigued me. Corvus's expression shifted to something almost curious. And because there is nothing you can do with this information. You have already rejected him. The bond is severed. Even if you went back and told him everything I just said, it would change nothing. He stepped aside, clearing her path to the door. So run along, little Omega. Run back to your border pack and your simple life. Leave the politics of kingdoms to those who understand them. Seren stared at him. At the casual cruelty in his eyes? At the satisfaction of a plan 10 years in the making finally coming to fruition? She wanted to scream, to attack him, to do something, anything to wipe that smug expression off his face. But she was an Omega, and he was an Alpha, and she had already made her choice. So she did what she had always done. She survived. Seren walked past Corvus Vantris, out of the stables and into the night beyond. Each step felt like betrayal, like abandoning someone who needed her. But the threads did not lie. If she stayed, she died. And her death would not save Kale, would not stop Corvus, would accomplish nothing except cutting short her own life. She made it to the edge of the tree line before she heard it. The howl, it echoed across the grounds of Ironvale Keep, raw and anguished and utterly broken. The sound of a wolf losing everything. The sound of a king's control finally shattering completely. Serene's steps faltered. Her wolf surged inside her, desperate to answer that call, desperate to run back and comfort their mate. But she forced herself to keep walking, forced herself to disappear into the forest shadows. Behind her, the howl rose again, and this time it was followed by another sound, the crash of something massive tearing through the keep, the roar of an alpha who had lost his last anchor to sanity. Seren did not look back. She could not afford to, not if she wanted to live. But as she ran through the dark woods, as branches tore at her silver gown and roots caught at her feet, she made herself a promise. She would survive this night. She would make it back to Thornwood. And then she would figure out a way to save them both, because the threads had shown her death if she stayed. But they had also shown her something else, something thin as spider silk but present, a future where they both lived, where the curse broke, where an Omega and a King found a way to defy fate itself. It was a small thread, a fragile possibility, but Seren Voss had built her entire life on surviving impossible odds, and she was not done fighting yet. The forest swallowed Seren whole. Moonlight filtered through the canopy in broken shards, barely enough to see the path ahead. Her silver gown caught on thorns and low branches, tearing with soft, ripping sounds that matched the ragged rhythm of her breathing. She ran until her legs burned, until her lungs screamed for air, until the howls from Ironvale Keep faded into the distance behind her. Only then did she slow. Only then did she let herself collapse against the rough bark of an ancient pine, sliding down until she sat on the forest floor with her knees drawn up to her chest. The bond ached. Even severed, even accepted, it ached like a phantom limb, a constant reminder of what she had just walked away from. 3 months ago, her life had been simple. Hard, yes. Lonely, certainly, but simple. She had known her place in Thornwood Pack. Omega, the lowest rank in the hierarchy, the wolves who served, who submitted, who made themselves small and useful and invisible. Her parents had been Omegas, too dead these past 15 years, from a rogue attack that had left only Seren and her brother Bram alive. Bram had raised her, protected her, taught her how to survive in a world that did not value wolves like them. He worked as a tracker for the pack, skilled enough to earn respect despite his rank. Seren worked in the pack house, cooking, cleaning, serving at gatherings when visiting alphas came to negotiate with their leader. It was not a grand life, but it was hers. Then Alpha King Kale Vantris came to Thornwood to settle a border dispute, and everything shattered. She could still see that moment with perfect clarity, could still feel the exact second when the mate bond snapped into place across a crowded hall. She had been carrying a platter of roasted venison, weaving between tables full of wolves who barely registered her existence. Just another Omega doing her duty, invisible. Then she looked up and met eyes the color of a winter sky. The world stopped. That connection appeared between them, blazing into existence with such force that she gasped aloud. Her wolf, usually so quiet and subdued inside her, surged to the surface with desperate recognition. Mate. The word echoed through every cell in her body. Not a thought, a truth, as fundamental as breathing, as undeniable as the pull of the moon on the tides. And he felt it too. She saw it in the way his entire body went rigid, in the way his nostrils flared as her scent reached him. Impossible. Intoxicating. For 3 heartbeats, the mate bond sang between them, a connection so profound it transcended pack boundaries and rank differences. In that moment, she was not an Omega, and he was not a king. They were simply 2 halves of one whole finally finding each other. Then he turned his face away, deliberately, coldly. Seren had felt that rejection like a slap, but she understood it. Of course she understood it. He was the Alpha King of Valdris. She was nobody. An Omega from a pack so minor that most wolves in the kingdom could not even find Thornwood on a map. The mate bond did not care about politics or rank, but kings had to. She told herself it was better this way, told herself to be grateful that he had not acknowledged the bond publicly. So she went back to her work, finished serving the feast, cleaned the dishes until her hands were raw, and tried very hard not to think about ice blue eyes and the scent of winter pine. 1 week later, the royal summons arrived. Bram had tried to stop her from going, had argued that nothing good would come from answering a call to the capital, that Omegas who climbed above their station always fell. Always. But the summons was not a request. It was a command sealed with the king's mark. Refusing meant exile or worse, and Seren would not bring that kind of trouble down on Thornwood Pack. So she went to Ironvale Keep, wearing her best dress, which was still threadbare compared to what court ladies wore, carrying nothing but a small bag with 2 changes of clothes and the wooden comb her mother had left her. She arrived 3 days before the ceremony. The chambers they gave her were beautiful, a canopied bed with blue velvet curtains, windows overlooking moonlit gardens, a fireplace that servants kept constantly burning. It should have felt like luxury after years of sleeping in a small room above the packhouse kitchens. Instead, it felt like a prison. Because the moment she stepped into Ironvale Keep, the whisper started. Border trash, low-born Omega, no proper lineage. What political value does she bring? The words followed her everywhere. Even the servants who brought her meals looked at her with barely concealed disdain. Seren had endured it. She knew how to make herself small, how to keep her eyes down and her voice soft, how to survive in places that did not want her. Now sitting in the dark forest with her ruined gown and her aching bond, Seren wondered if that hope had been the most foolish thing of all. A branch snapped nearby. Seren's head jerked up, her wolf surging to alertness. She was not alone. Then she caught the scent, her scent mixing with winter pine. He had followed her. Seren scrambled to her feet, pressing her back against the tree. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Part terror, part desperate hope. The massive shape that emerged from the darkness was not human. A wolf, black as midnight, larger than any she had ever seen. Eyes that glowed gold in the scattered moonlight, burning with an intensity that stole her breath. The Alpha King in his true form. He moved with predatory grace, each step deliberate and controlled. But Seren could see the tension in his body, the way his hackles were raised, the way his lips pulled back from fangs that could tear her throat out with a single bite. He was not in control. Not fully. The wolf was too close to the surface. Seren forced herself to stand still. Running would only trigger the chase instinct, and she could not outrun an alpha wolf. The wolf stalked closer, 10 feet away, 5. Close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, the first warmth she had felt from him. As if the wolf ran hotter than the human form, fighting the curse with pure animal vitality. His growl vibrated through the air, through her bones, through the remnants of the bond that still connected them despite everything. It was not a threat. It was anguish given voice. Fury and confusion and desperate need all wrapped into a sound that made her chest ache. Your Majesty, her voice came out steadier than she expected. You rejected me. Let me go, the wolf snarled. The sound was answer enough. Let her go never. Seren watched as the massive black wolf began to shift. It should not have been possible. Wolves did not shift in the middle of confrontations. The change took focus and control that rage should have stripped away. But Kale Vantris was not an ordinary wolf. Bones cracked, fur receded. The massive wolf collapsed inward, reforming into a human shape. Within moments, the Alpha King stood before her, naked, trembling. His pale skin almost luminous in the moonlight. Steam rose from his body where the wolf's heat met the cool night air. I cannot. His voice was hoarse, raw from howling. My wolf refuses to let you leave. The bond. He stopped, started again. If you go beyond the border, he will hunt you. He will drag you back whether I command it or not. Seren stared at him, at the man who had publicly rejected her hours ago, at the king whose wolf was tearing him apart because she walked away. That is not my problem. The words came out harder than she intended. I know. Something that might have been agony crossed his face. And I would reject you again to keep you safe. But my wolf does not understand reason. He only understands that his mate is leaving. And he will burn this kingdom to ash before he allows it. The air between them vibrated with tension, with the pull of the bond that should have been severed but was not. Not really. Not when his wolf refused to let go. Then what do you want from me? Seren demanded. You made it very clear in front of 500 witnesses that I am not suitable to be your queen, that I bring no political value, that I am nothing you need. His jaw clenched. I was trying to save your life by humiliating me by setting you free. The words exploded from him. The curse Seren. It spreads with emotional connection. Every person I care about, everyone I allow close the curse consumes faster. He took a step toward her. His hands were shaking. I felt the mate bond lock into place 3 months ago in Thornwood. I knew the moment I looked at you what you were, what you would become if I claimed you. And what is that dead? His voice broke on the word. Within months, maybe weeks, the curse would spread through the bond. It would freeze you from the inside out just like it is freezing me. Seren felt her anger wavering, felt understanding beginning to creep in. So what now? She asked quietly. You cannot claim me. You cannot let me go. What exactly do you expect to happen? Kale ran a hand through his pale hair. The gesture was so human, so vulnerable. Stay. The word came out like a plea. Not as my mate, not as my queen, but as a guest under my protection. I will not touch you. I will not claim you. But I cannot let you leave. Not yet. Not until my wolf calms enough to accept your absence. That sounds like a prison. It is. He did not try to deny it. It is the only compromise I can offer. The only way to keep you safe from the curse and my wolf sane enough to function. Seren looked at him. Really looked at him. At the pale skin that should not be pale. At the slight frost beginning to form at his fingertips. At the desperation in those ice blue eyes. And she saw the threads again. Golden light connecting them. Shadow chains wrapped around his heart, and beyond those wrapped around those chains another set of threads. Darker. More deliberately placed. Threads that did not grow naturally from a father's dying curse. Someone was feeding this curse, strengthening it, making it worse. Her breath caught. Corvus, the uncle who stood to gain everything if Kale died. The predator who had been waiting in the shadows for 10 years. Who had just confessed to manipulating the rejection. Who wanted Kale's wolf to tear him apart. If she left now, she would be playing directly into his hands. Fine. The words surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise Kale. I will stay, but I have conditions. Name them. You will tell me the truth about your curse, all of it, not just what you have told everyone else. I want to know everything. She lifted her chin. And if I find a way to leave safely, a way that will not drive your wolf into madness, you will let me go. No hunting, no dragging me back. You will release me completely. Kale stared at her for a long moment, studying her face in the moonlight, searching for something she did not understand. Agreed, he finally said. On one condition of my own, what his eyes met hers, and something ancient and desperate lurked in their depths, something that made her wolf whimper in recognition. Do not try to save me, Seren Voss. Whatever you see, whatever you learn, do not sacrifice yourself for a man who is already dead. The words hung between them like a prophecy, like a warning she knew she would not heed, because she had already seen the threads, had already seen the thin possibility where they both survived, where an Omega and a king defied fate itself. And Seren Voss had spent her entire life surviving impossible odds. She was not about to stop now. The walk back to Ironvale Keep happened in silence. Kale had shifted back to wolf form, massive and black against the night, padding alongside her with movements that were both protective and predatory. He did not touch her, did not crowd her space, but his presence was impossible to ignore. They entered through a side gate that led to the private gardens. A guard stood, watch his eyes widening as he took in the sight of the massive black wolf and the Omega in torn silver silk. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then seemed to think better of it, simply bowed his head and stepped aside. The wolf led her through corridors she had not seen before, servants' passages and back stairs that avoided the main halls where nobles might still be gathered, discussing the scandal of the evening. They reached her chambers. The wolf stopped outside the door, golden eyes fixed on her face. Waiting, Seren pushed the door open, turned back to look at him. Tomorrow, she said quietly, you promised me the truth. I will hold you to that. The wolf's head dipped once, agreement. Then he turned and padded down the hallway, disappearing into shadows, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the ache of a bond that refused to die. Seren stepped into her room and closed the door, leaned against it, let herself breathe for the first time since the rejection ceremony. The fire had burned low in the grate, but someone had been here. A nightgown was laid out on the bed. A basin of water sat on the washstand, fresh towels folded neatly beside it. She moved mechanically, stripped out of the ruined gown, washed the dried blood from her face and the dirt from her feet, pulled on the soft nightgown that smelled of lavender. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and finally let herself feel everything she had been holding back. The rejection, The pain of the bond trying to sever, the terror of Corvus's confession, the impossible choice Kale had offered. She did not cry. Crying accomplished nothing, but her hands shook as she pulled back the velvet covers and climbed into bed. Sleep when it came was fractured, filled with dreams of ice and shadow, of golden threads snapping. She woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and a soft knock at her door. "My lady," a familiar voice called. "May I enter?" Isolde, the maid who had been assigned to her when she first arrived, a young woman with copper hair and freckled cheeks who had been the only servant to meet Serene's eyes without contempt. "Come in," Serene called, sitting up and pushing tangled hair from her face. The door opened. Isolde entered carrying a breakfast tray. Her eyes were wide with poorly concealed curiosity, but her voice remained carefully neutral. "Good morning, my lady. I thought you might prefer to break your fast in your chambers today." Translation: the entire keep was talking about last night, and Isolde was trying to spare her the humiliation. "Thank you," Serene managed a small smile. "That is very thoughtful." Isolde set the tray on a small table by the window, poured tea from a silver pot. Her movements were practiced and efficient, but Serene could see the questions burning behind her eyes. "You may ask," Serene said quietly. "I know you want to." Isolde's hand stilled on the teapot. She looked up, meeting Serene's gaze. "Is it true that you accepted the king's rejection, that you walked out of the great hall while he was still commanding you to stay?" "Yes." "And the king?" Isolde's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "They say he shifted in the middle of the throne room, that he destroyed half the hall in his rage, that he chased you into the forest." "Also true." Isolde sat down heavily in the chair opposite Serene. "In all my years serving this house, I have never seen the king lose control like that. Never." She looked down at her hands. "They say you must be a witch, that you cast a spell to make him obsessed." "I am not a witch." Serene reached for her teacup. The porcelain was warm against her palms. "Though I understand why people would think that, it is easier than accepting that their king might actually want something he cannot have." "What will you do?" Isolde asked. "Now that you are staying, I am going to learn the truth about his curse." Serene took a sip of tea. It was perfectly prepared, strong and slightly bitter. "And then I am going to find a way to save us both." Isolde's eyes widened. "My lady, the greatest healers in the kingdom have tried to break that curse. If they could not do it, how can you? Because I can see things they cannot." The words came out before Serene could stop them. But Isolde did not look afraid. She looked intrigued. What things? Serene hesitated, then made a decision. Isolde had been kind to her when no one else was. That earned her some measure of trust. "Threads," Serene said quietly. "I see the connections between souls, the bonds that tie us together. My mother called it the weaving." Isolde leaned forward. "And what do these threads show you about the king, that he is dying? But not just from his father's curse. Someone is feeding it, making it stronger. Someone who wants him dead." Isolde's face went pale. "Lord Corvus, you know, everyone knows he stands to gain if the king dies without an heir, but no one has proof. And accusing the regent of treason without evidence is suicide. Then I need to find evidence." Serene set down her teacup. "But first I need to understand the curse itself. The king promised to tell me everything tonight." Isolde stood smoothing her apron. "I will keep watch. If anything changes, I will come tell you immediately." "Thank you, Isolde." The maid paused at the door. "My lady, for what it is worth, I hope you succeed. The king has been alone for so long." She left before Serene could respond. The day passed slowly. As afternoon faded to evening, Serene dressed carefully. Not in the elaborate gowns the court expected, but in the simple traveling dress she had brought from Thornwood. Soft wool dyed deep blue, practical, comfortable. She was braiding her hair when the knock came. The voice that called through the door was male, deep, controlled. "Come." Serene opened the door to find Kale standing in the corridor. He was dressed in black from head to toe. Simple tunic and breeches. No crown, no royal regalia. Just a man pale and exhausted with shadows under his eyes that spoke of a sleepless day. His gaze swept over her, taking in the simple dress, the loose braid. Something that might have been approval flickered in his expression. "Walk with me," he said. "What I have to tell you is not meant for walls that have ears." She followed him through the keep, down more servants' passages, through a door that led to the battlements. The evening air was cool against her skin. The sun had just set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. They walked along the wall until they reached a tower that overlooked the forest. Kale stopped there, his hands bracing against the stone parapet. For a long moment he said nothing. just stared out at the darkening trees. My father was not a good man. His voice was quiet, but it carried clearly in the evening stillness. He was strong, powerful, a formidable alpha, but he was also jealous, paranoid. He saw threats everywhere, especially from those closest to him. Seren said nothing, waited for him to continue. My mother, Queen Thessaly, is a brilliant woman, educated in history and law and political strategy. My father valued her mind at first, used her counsel, but as the years passed, he began to resent it, began to see her intelligence as a challenge to his authority. He turned to look at Seren. His eyes were haunted. When my sister Lysara was born, she was weak, sickly from the start. The healer said she would not survive her first winter. My mother refused to accept that. She reached out to every healer, every wise woman, every source of knowledge she could find, trying to save her daughter. And she found someone Seren guessed, a witch from the southern territories, one who claimed to have cures the royal healers did not know. They corresponded in secret for months. Kale's hands clenched on the stone. My mother was not having an affair. She was trying to save Lysara. But my father found the letters, saw the secrecy, and assumed the worst. His jaw tightened. He demanded I execute my mother for treason. Adultery with an enemy of the kingdom, he called it. Never mind that there was no evidence. Never mind that Lysara was dying and my mother was desperate. He wanted blood for the imagined betrayal. What did you do? I refused. Kale's voice was flat. I told him he was wrong, that mother was innocent, that I would not kill her to satisfy his paranoia. He turned back to the forest. So he used his dying breath to curse me instead. Dying breath. He was already ill. Some wasting sickness the healers could not name. He had weeks left at most, but he saved his strength for one final act of cruelty. Kale's breath misted in the air despite the relatively mild temperature. He called me to his chambers, placed his hand over my heart, and spoke the curse with the last of his power. What did he say? Kale's voice dropped to barely a whisper. As you have frozen your heart against your father's will, so shall your heart freeze against all warmth. As you have chosen isolation over duty, so shall isolation be your only companion. You will rule alone, love alone, die alone, and any who try to thaw the ice around your heart will share your fate. Seren felt ice run down her spine. That is why you rejected me. That is why I have rejected everyone for 10 years. Every potential alliance, Martin, every friendship, every connection that might have mattered. He looked at her. The curse feeds on emotional attachment. The more I care about someone, the faster it spreads. To them and to me, wow. But Lysara died before the witch's cure could arrive. Natural causes, the healer said. A weak constitution that finally gave out. Kale's voice was hollow. I have always wondered if my father's curse somehow accelerated it, but I have no proof. Only suspicion and grief. Seren stepped closer, laid her hand on the stone near his. Not touching, but close. I am sorry. For all of it. Do not be sorry. He turned to face her fully. I rejected you to save you from this. From dying slowly while I die slowly beside you. The threads between them pulsed with light. Even in the fading daylight, Seren could see them. Golden and strong despite the rejection. Tell me about the curse itself, she said. What does it feel like? Kale was silent for a moment. Then he reached for the laces of his tunic, pulled them loose, drew the fabric over his head. His torso was a map of muscle and scars, old wounds from battles fought and won. But across his chest, directly over his heart, his skin had taken on a faint blue tinge, like frost beneath the surface. And spreading from that central point, thin lines of darker blue traced outward, veins turning to ice. It started here. He placed his palm over his heart. The day my father died, just a cold spot, nothing more. But over the years it has spread, slowly at first, then faster whenever I allowed someone close. Seren's breath caught. The shadow change she had seen in the threads overlaid perfectly with those blue lines. But there was something else, something the physical symptoms did not show. May I? She gestured toward his chest. He nodded. She stepped closer, placed her hand over his heart. The cold shocked through her palm. Not the chill of cool skin, the deep, penetrating cold of true frost. But beneath that cold, she felt his heartbeat. Strong, steady, fighting. And she saw the threads more clearly than ever before. The golden bond between them blazing bright. The shadow chains of the curse wrapped around his heart. And woven through those chains deliberate as embroidery threads of a darker magic. Newer than the curse itself, fed and strengthened over years. Corvus, she breathed, He is not just waiting for you to die. He is making sure you die. Kale's hand covered hers, held it against his chest. What do you see? Siren closed her eyes, let herself sink deeper into the weaving, let herself trace the corrupted threads back to their source. The original curse is there, your father's final act of cruelty, but someone has been feeding it, adding power to it, making it stronger and more virulent than it should be. She opened her eyes and met his gaze. And those threads lead to your uncle. How, I do not know yet. But Saren's mind raced. He told me last night that he had been working toward your death for a decade, that he encouraged your rejection of me. I thought he meant political manipulation. But what if it was more than that? What if he has been using dark magic to ensure the curse kills you? Kale's expression hardened. If that is true, if Corvus has been feeding my father's curse all these years. He trailed off, his hands clenched into fists. That would make him guilty of attempted regicide, of treason, if we can prove it. How Saren thought of her mother, of the gift that had been passed down through their bloodline, of the ability she had never fully tested because using it was dangerous. I need to try something, she said slowly, but it might hurt. Hurt you or hurt me both. Kale studied her face, then nodded. Do what you must. Saren took a breath, centered herself, then reached for the threads with intention. Not just seeing them, but grasping them, pulling them. The golden bond between her and Kale flared to life. Heat poured from her core, flowing down her arm into her hand into his chest. Not physical heat, something deeper, something that existed in the space between souls. The shadow chains recoiled, the frost on his skin began to recede. Just slightly, just enough to show it was possible. But the corrupted threads fought back. They pulsed with dark energy, trying to maintain their hold. And where Surin touched them, pain lanced through her hand, sharp and cold and wrong. She gasped but did not let go. Kale's other hand came up to steady her. His eyes had gone gold, his wolf rising to the surface, sensing its mate in distress. Stop, he growled. You are hurting yourself. Not yet. Surin gritted her teeth, pushed harder, followed one of the corrupted threads back toward its source, saw where it connected, saw the ritual that sustained it, and saw the sacrifice that had fueled it. Her eyes flew open. Lysara, what, your sister? She did not die of natural causes. Surin's voice shook. Corvus killed her, used her blood to create a vessel for dark magic. That is how he has been feeding the curse all these years, with the life force of an innocent child. Kale's control shattered. His wolf surged forward, eyes blazing. He killed Lysara. The words came out in a growl that was more animal than human. My 7-year-old sister. To fuel a curse. Saren stumbled back as power exploded from Kale. Raw alpha dominance mixed with grief and rage. She caught his face in her hands, forced him to look at her. Kale, listen to me, we cannot prove this yet. We need evidence. We need to find the ritual components. The link between him and the curse. If we accuse him without proof, he will simply deny it. And we will both end up dead. His breathing was ragged. His entire body trembled with the effort of not shifting. Not hunting down his uncle and tearing him apart. How do we find proof? Saren's mind raced. The threads showed connections, showed the flow of power, if she could trace them physically. Find where Corvus performed his rituals. I need access to his chambers, his private spaces, anywhere he might keep ritual components or evidence of dark magic. That is suicide. Kale's hands gripped her shoulders. If he catches you, he will not catch me. Saren met his eyes steadily. Because you are going to provide a distraction, something public and dramatic that keeps the court's attention while I search. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Kale's face. What did you have in mind? Saren thought of the whispers, the gossip, the court that believed her to be nothing more than a low-born omega out of her depth. Tomorrow night there is a court dinner. Yes, yes. Then tomorrow night you are going to publicly claim me as your mate, in front of everyone who thinks you rejected me, in front of Corvus and the council and every noble who whispered that I was unsuitable. She lifted her chin. You are going to make them all believe that the king has gone mad with obsession for an omega he cannot have. That will paint a target on your back. I know, but it will also make Corvus confident, make him think his plan is working, that your wolf is tearing you apart just as he hoped. She stepped closer. And while he is busy gloating and the court is busy gossiping, I will be searching his chambers for proof. Kale searched her face, seeing the determination there, the intelligence, the courage of a wolf who had survived by being underestimated her entire life. You are certain about this, Saren smiled slightly, but I am certain that doing nothing means we both die. So we might as well die trying. His hand came up to cup her cheek. The touch was gentle despite the cold of his skin. You are either very brave or very foolish, Lorraine Voss. Can I not be both? He laughed. The sound was startled and genuine, the first real laugh she had heard from him. Then he leaned down and pressed his forehead to hers, a gesture of trust, of connection, of two wolves facing impossible odds together. Tomorrow night, then, he murmured. We start a war. Tomorrow night, Seren agreed. But before she could step back, before the moment could end, Kale spoke again. There is something else you should know. His voice was quiet. Something I have never told anyone. She waited. That first night in Thornwood, when I turned away. I knew then what you were to me. His jaw tightened. Do you want to know something pathetic? What I came back. 4 more times over those 3 months. Different excuses, border patrols, treaty negotiations, supply inspections. A bitter laugh. I counted. 17 times I saw you across rooms and hallways in the gardens. I memorized everything. How you tucked your hair behind your left ear when nervous. How you hummed old pack songs while working. How you smiled at your brother when you thought no one was watching. Seren's breath caught. 17 times. 17 times I should have stayed away, but I could not. His eyes met hers. That is how I knew the curse would kill you, because it was already consuming me, and we had not even spoken. The admission hung between them, raw, vulnerable. A confession from a king who had spent 10 years keeping everyone at arm's length. Seren felt something shift in her chest, something that went beyond the mate bond, beyond attraction or duty or fate. This was choice. His choice to tell her choice to stay and fight. I'm glad you came back, she said softly. 17 times or 70, I am glad. Kale's thumb traced her cheekbone. So am I. They stood like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. Two wolves who should have been enemies or strangers bound together by threads. Neither of them had chosen, but both were beginning to accept. Then Kale stepped back, the mask sliding back into place. The king returning. Tomorrow, he said, we save each other or die trying. Seren nodded. Tomorrow. The court dinner blazed with candlelight and tension. 300 nobles packed the great hall dressed in their finest silks and jewels, pretending they had not spent the entire day gossiping about the king's madness and the Omega who had driven him to it. Seren sat at the far end of the high table, exactly where protocol demanded. Isolated. Ignored. The rejected mate who inexplicably remained at court. Perfect. She watched Kale from beneath lowered lashes. He sat on his throne speaking to advisors with the cold precision he was known for. Nothing in his demeanor suggested what was about to happen. He was ice itself, controlled, untouchable. Then his eyes found hers across the hall. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. Kale stood. The hall fell silent. Every conversation died mid-sentence as hundreds of eyes turned toward their king. He descended from the throne with predatory grace, walked directly toward Seren. The crowd parted before him like water nobles scrambling out of his path. Seren's heart hammered. This was the plan. They had rehearsed this. But watching him approach with those winter eyes blazing gold, watching the barely leashed violence in every movement, she felt genuine fear spike through her. He stopped before her chair, extended his hand. Dance with me, not a request, a command that resonated with alpha dominance. Seren placed her hand in his. The cold shocked through her palm, but she did not flinch. Let him pull her to her feet. Lead her to the center of the hall where musicians waited with instruments half raised. The moment his other hand settled on her waist, the bond roared to life. Every wolf in the hall could smell her, could recognize the bond. Overwhelming, undeniable. Every wolf present could smell it, could recognize what it meant. True mates. Kale pulled her closer than propriety allowed, close enough that she could feel the chill radiating from his chest, close enough that his breath stirred her hair. They are staring, she whispered. Let them. His voice was a low growl. Let them see what they tried to deny. The musicians began to play, a slow waltz. Kale moved with fluid grace, guiding her through steps she barely knew. But it did not matter. Every eye in the hall was locked on them, on the king who had publicly rejected his mate, now holding her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to sanity. Corvus watched from the shadows near the council table. His expression was carefully neutral, but Seren could see satisfaction in his eyes. He thought this was exactly what he wanted, a king losing control. Good. You have 1 hour, Kale murmured against her ear. His chambers are in the west tower. 3rd floor. The guards have been told to patrol the eastern wing tonight. What about his personal servants? Isolde will create a distraction, a fire in the kitchens. Nothing dangerous but enough to pull staff away. Saren nodded slightly. When this dance ends, I will excuse myself. Claim fatigue, and I will make a scene about letting you go. He spun her, and she saw his eyes had gone fully gold. My wolf will demand you stay. The court will think I am unraveling. You do not have to pretend very hard. His grip tightened. No, I do not. The music swelled. Kale pulled her into a final turn that brought them chest to chest, close enough that propriety shattered completely, close enough that she could feel his heart beating beneath the ice. Be careful, he whispered. If Corvus suspects anything, he will not. She met his eyes. Trust me, I do. The words were simple. True, terrifying in their honesty. That is what frightens me. The music ended. The hall erupted in whispers. Saren stepped back from Kale's arms and curtsied deeply. Your Majesty, I must retire. I am not feeling well. Kale's eyes flashed. No, his voice carried through the hall. You will stay. Every wolf held their breath. Saren lifted her chin. I am tired, Your Majesty. Surely you can continue the evening without me. The growl that rumbled from Kale's chest made nobles at the far end of the hall press back against the walls. Alpha power rolled off him in waves. Stay. One word, layered with command and desperation and the barely controlled rage of a wolf losing its mate. Saren felt the compulsion try to take root, felt it slide off her like water. Because she was not bound to him. Not anymore. The rejection had severed that chain. She turned and walked toward the doors. Behind her, Kale roared. The sound shattered wine glasses on the tables, cracked the stone floor, sent lesser wolves to their knees. But Saren kept walking, out of the great hall, into the corridors beyond, moving quickly now that she was out of sight. She did not go to her chambers. She went west. Corvus's chambers were locked. But Saren had learned to pick locks years ago, a skill acquired from necessity, when storage rooms held food she and Bram could not afford. Her hands shook as she worked the mechanism, hyper-aware of every sound in the corridor. The lock clicked. She slipped inside and closed the door behind her. The rooms were elegant, dark wood furniture, rich tapestries, books lining one wall. Nothing immediately suspicious. Nothing that screamed dark magic or ritual murder. But Saren was not looking with her eyes. She closed them and reached for the threads. The weaving appeared before her. Thousands of connections filling the space. Most were normal, faint, the everyday ties between a wolf and his possessions. But beneath them, hidden like poison in honey, she saw the corrupted threads, dark and pulsing, leading to a section of wall that looked solid. Saren crossed to it, ran her hands over the paneling, found the seam, the hidden catch. The panel swung open, behind it a small chamber, and inside the evidence she needed. A ritual altar, black candles burned down to stumps, chalk markings on the floor in patterns she did not recognize but knew were wrong. And in the center, 2 glass vials containing what looked like dried blood. Lysara's blood, preserved for 10 years, used to feed the curse. Saren's hands trembled as she reached for one of the vials. This was it. This was proof that Corvus had been using dark magic. Her fingers closed around the smaller vial. She slipped it into the pocket of her dress, then reached for the larger one. Did you really think I would not notice someone rifling through my private chambers? Corvus's voice was silk over steel. Amused. Dangerous. Saren spun the larger vial still in her hand. He stood in the doorway. No servants, no witnesses, just a predator who had caught his prey at exactly where he wanted her. You are cleverer than I gave you credit for, little Omega. He stepped into the room, closed the door behind him, but not clever enough. I found your ritual chamber. Saren's voice was steadier than she felt. I found the blood you used, the proof that you killed Lysara. Did you? Corvus smiled. And who will believe you, an Omega with no rank, making wild accusations against the king's regent? He took another step closer. Even if you showed them those vials, I would simply claim they were planted. That you are trying to frame me because you are bitter about the rejection. People will believe me. Will they? He tilted his head. Or will they believe that a low-born Omega seduced their king with dark magic, that you drove him mad with lust and now seek to destroy his family from within? The threads around him pulsed with corruption, with malice, with 10 years of patient, meticulous evil. You cannot kill me, Saren said. Not here, not in your own chambers. That would be too suspicious. True, Corvus's smile widened, but I can make you disappear. A tragic accident, a fall from the battlements, a broken-hearted Omega who could not accept her mate's rejection. He shrugged. So many possibilities. Seren's wolf snarled inside her. But she was an Omega facing a full Alpha. She could not fight him, could not outrun him. But she could improvise. She threw the larger vial at his face. Corvus ducked reflexively. The glass flew past him, shattering against the far wall. Blood and shards sprayed across his expensive tapestries. And Saren ran. She bolted for the door, made it into the corridor, heard Corvus curse behind her guards. His voice echoed through the halls. The Omega has gone mad. She is trying to kill me. Footsteps pounded. Armor clanked. Guards appearing from both directions. Saren did the only thing she could. She ran toward the sounds of chaos. Toward the great hall where Kale was still holding court. Where witnesses were. She burst through the doors, gasping. The smaller vial clutched in her hand. Dress torn from running. Hair wild. The entire court turned to stare. Kale was on his feet instantly. Gold eyes locked on her. On the vial. On the guards pursuing her. What happened? His voice was deadly quiet. She attacked me. Corvus appeared behind the guards, breathing hard. His expression was perfect concern. Broke into my chambers and tried to kill me with dark magic. Look at the vial in her hand. Saren met Kale's eyes. Found your uncle's ritual chamber. Found the blood he used to feed your curse. Found proof he killed Lysara. The temperature plummeted. Frost spread from where Kale stood, creeping across the floor in crystalline patterns. Uncle. The word was barely human. Is this true? Of course not. Corvus spread his hands. She is delusional, obsessed. She cannot accept your rejection, so she seeks to destroy anyone who stands between you. Show me your chambers, Kale commanded. Corvus hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Now, they stood in Corvus's hidden chamber. Kale, Corvus, Saren Daxon, and 3 council members, all staring at the ritual altar, at the shattered larger vial and blood staining the wall, at the chalk markings, at the black candles, at the undeniable evidence of dark magic. This proves nothing, Corvus said, but his voice had lost its smooth confidence. Anyone could have created this. Could have planted it in my rooms. The blood is Lysara's. Kale's voice was ice. I can smell it. 7 years old and preserved by dark magic. You cannot possibly. I am her brother. The roar shook the walls. I know her scent. I mourned her for 10 years. And you used her blood to kill me. Kale crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, grabbed Corvus by the throat, slammed him against the wall hard enough to crack stone. You killed a child, your own niece, for power. Corvus's eyes flashed gold, his own alpha dominance rising. She was already dying. I simply used what would have been wasted anyway. And yes, I fed your curse, strengthened it, because you were always too weak to rule properly, too emotional, too human. Kale's grip tightened. Guards, Daxon stepped forward, grabbed Corvus's arms, pulled him away from Kale before the king could kill him. Lord Corvus Vantress Daxon's voice rang with authority. You are under arrest for attempted regicide, dark magic, and the murder of Princess Lysara. You will be tried before the full council at dawn. Corvus laughed. Even restrained, even caught, he laughed. You think a trial will matter? Half the council supports me. They know you are dying, nephew. They know you need me. His eyes found Saren, and they will never accept an Omega as queen. Kill me, and this kingdom will tear itself apart. Then let it tear. Kale's eyes blazed gold. I will burn it to ash before I let you rule. Daxon dragged Corvus from the chamber. The council members followed, whispering urgently, leaving Kale and Saren alone among the evidence of 10 years of betrayal. Kale turned to her, saw the smaller vial still clutched in her hand, the exhaustion in her eyes, the trembling she could not quite hide. He crossed to her, pulled her into his arms despite the cold, despite everything. You found it. His voice was rough. You risked everything and you found it. We are not safe yet. Saren pressed the vial into his hand. Half the council supports him. The trial will not happen. Kale's arms tightened around her. Because tomorrow I'm going to do something that will change everything. What? He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. There was something fierce and determined in his gaze. Something that made her wolf sit up and take notice. Tomorrow I claim you before the entire kingdom, not as a scandal, not as madness, but as my choice, my queen, my mate. He cupped her face gently, and I will show them exactly why you are stronger than any of them ever imagined. Kale, trust me. He pressed his forehead to hers. One more time, trust me. And despite everything, despite the danger and the uncertainty and the half of the council that wanted her gone, Saren found that she did. Tomorrow, she whispered, we end this. Tomorrow, he agreed. Dawn broke over Ironvale Keep. But instead of a trial in a closed council chamber, the courtyard filled with witnesses for a ceremony that would change the kingdom forever. A mating. Kel stood at the center in full royal regalia, crown on his head, the ancient ceremonial robes of Valdris, every inch the Alpha King. But his eyes, when they found Seren approaching through the crowd, were warm, no longer winter ice, something deeper, something human. Seren walked toward him in a gown of silver and gold, the entire court watching, whispering, confused. The king was supposed to be trying a traitor. Instead, he was claiming the mate he had rejected. Corvus was dragged forward in chains, forced to his knees before the assembled court. His expression was rage barely contained, but he could do nothing. Not here, not surrounded by hundreds of witnesses. Before you all, Kale's voice carried across the courtyard. I present evidence of treason. He gestured, and servants brought forward the ritual altar they had removed from Corvus's chambers. The chalk-marked floor panel, the black candles, the remaining vial of blood that Seren had preserved. My uncle has been feeding the curse that has slowly been killing me for 10 years. He sacrificed my sister, Princess Lysara, when she was 7 years old, used her innocent blood to fuel dark magic. He manipulated the rejection of my mate to drive my wolf into madness. He committed regicide murder and treason against the crown. The court erupted in chaos. These are lies, Corvus shouted. Fabrications by an Omega witch who has enchanted our king, then let the moon goddess herself judge. Kale turned to Seren, held out his hand. Show them. Seren took his hand, felt the bond surge between them, and reached for the threads. This time she did not just pull them into visibility for herself. She pulled them into reality, made them solid, made them undeniable. The entire courtyard gasped as golden light blazed between Seren and Kale, as the shadow chains around his heart became visible, coiling like dark serpents. As the corrupted threads leading from those chains directly to Corvus materialized for all to see, pulsing with sickly dark energy. You see, Kale's voice was triumph and vindication. The moon goddess shows us truth. My uncle's corruption, his connection to my curse. His guilt written in the threads of fate itself for all to witness. Impossible, Corvus lunged forward, but the chains held, and Daxon's grip tightened. Seren pulled harder on the corrupted threads. She could feel them now solid beneath her mental grasp. She followed them back to their source, into Corvus's heart, into the dark magic that had sustained him for 10 years, that had kept him young and vital while his nephew slowly froze to death, and she ripped it out. The scream that tore from Corvus was not human. Dark energy exploded from his body in visible waves. Wolves stumbled back. Some cried out in terror. But Seren did not let go. She pulled until the last thread of corruption came free, until the connection to Kale's curse severed completely. The shadow chain shattered. Kale gasped. Warmth flooded through him for the first time in 10 years. True warmth. Not the artificial heat of a wolf fighting a curse, but the natural warmth of a healthy alpha. The ice receded. The frost vanished from his fingertips. The blue tinge over his heart faded to healthy pink. The curse was broken. Corvus aged before their eyes. 10 years of borrowed power draining away in seconds. His hair turned white, his skin wrinkled, his back bent. He collapsed to the ground, suddenly old and frail and powerless. No longer a threat. Just a broken old man who had sacrificed everything for power he would never possess. Seren swayed. The effort had drained her, had taken something vital. She had never pulled that hard on the threads before. Never manipulated reality to that degree. Kale caught her before she fell, held her against his chest as warmth finally returned to his skin, as his heart beat strong and steady without the shadow of death hanging over it. My queen, he whispered. My mate, my salvation. She smiled, even exhausted, even barely conscious. Yours. The court erupted, not in whispers this time, in cheers. The corrupted regent had fallen. The curse was broken. Their king was saved. And an Omega from a minor border pack had just proven herself stronger than anyone had imagined. Take him, Kale commanded, and Daxon hauled Corvus away. To the dungeons. He will stand trial for his crimes. As the guards dragged the broken regent from the courtyard, Kale turned to face his kingdom, still holding Seren against him, still radiating the warmth of a curse finally lifted. This woman, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the courtyard. This Omega from Thornwood Pack. She saw what no one else could see. She risked her life to expose a traitor. She broke a curse that the greatest healers in the kingdom could not touch. He looked down at her and his expression softened. And she did it not for glory or power or political gain, but because she refused to let me die alone. He turned back to the crowd. I rejected her once, to protect her, to save her from a death I thought was inevitable. But she did not accept that fate. She fought for a future where we both could live. He raised his voice. And now, before all of you, before the moon goddess herself, I claim Saren Voss as my true mate, my queen, the future of this kingdom. The crowd roared approval. Not all of them. Some nobles still looked skeptical. Some whispered behind their hands. But the majority cheered, because they had seen the evidence with their own eyes, had watched an Omega break a curse through sheer force of will. Kale lowered his head to Saren's. Are you ready for what? To let me claim you properly, in front of everyone. No more rejection, no more doubt. Saren's breath caught. Then she smiled. I have been ready since the moment you caught me in the Great Hall. Kale's answering smile was fierce and joyful. Then let us finish what we started. He kissed her, not gently, not carefully, but with all the passion and need and desperation of 10 years spent alone, of a bond that had been tested and proven stronger than curses or politics or fate itself. When they finally broke apart, Kale's eyes were gold, but not with rage this time, with joy. Mate, his wolf rumbled. Mate, Saren agreed. Then Kale lowered his head to her neck and claimed her. His teeth sank into the junction of her neck and shoulder, the claiming mark, the permanent bond that would tie them together for the rest of their lives. Saren gasped at the sharp pain, then the flood of warmth and connection and rightness that followed. When he pulled back, her blood on his lips, she reached up and pulled him down to her level, sank her own teeth into his neck, claimed him back. The bond snapped fully into place, golden and blazing and unbreakable. No curse could touch it now. No uncle could manipulate it. It was theirs, completely, finally. The crowd went wild. Kale lifted Saren into his arms, spinning her once before setting her on her feet. Then he took her hand and raised it high. Your queen, he shouted, and the kingdom roared back their acceptance. The great hall blazed with celebration. The formal coronation complete, the claiming marks on both their necks fully healed and visible for all to see. The bond between them fully realized at last. Saren stood on the balcony beside her mate, her king, looking out over Valdres as the sun set in shades of gold and crimson. What do you see? Kale asked, his arm wrapped around her waist, his warmth finally real and permanent. She smiled, closed her eyes, let herself see the threads one more time. 3 children with your eyes and my stubbornness, a kingdom that prospers. She looked toward the gardens below where Queen Thessaly knelt beside a memorial stone planting jasmine for the daughter she had lost. Your mother finally at peace. She opened her eyes, met his gaze, and us, growing old together, loving fiercely, living fully. Kale pulled her close, kissed her with a passion that made the crowd below cheer yet again. Everything we almost lost, he murmured against her lips, and everything we gained by refusing to give up, she finished. Below them in the front of the crowd, Bram stood with tears streaming down his face, pride written clear in every line of his body, his little sister, a queen. Beside him, Isolde dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, grinning through her tears. And behind them, hundreds of wolves from every corner of Valdres, witnesses to a love story that would be told for generations. The girl who accepted rejection and turned it into salvation. The king who learned that sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to let someone save you. And the thread of fate that refused to break no matter how hard the world tried to sever it. Saren leaned into Kale's embrace and watched the sun set over their kingdom, their home, their future. The threads showed her so much, showed her challenges still to come, showed her joy and sorrow in equal measure, as all lives contained. But they also showed her this, a bond that would endure, a love that would bond, a partnership that would reshape a kingdom. She had survived impossible odds to get here, and she would survive whatever came next, because she was Saren Voss, Omega, queen, mate to an Alpha King, and she was exactly where she was meant to be.